Dear brothers, what's up, boys? First and foremost, exciting news, finally today. T-shirts and shorts will be available for purchase starting this Friday. So there's going to be a link that I've set up. So I partnered with a company called Go Train, which basically makes my absolute favorite pair of shorts in the entire world. And so they are actually going to do all of this for us, which is awesome. So I'm going to have a link set up that I will have in the show notes. And once that 2 weeks is up and you guys have all made your orders, they put them into production and they ship them directly to you. So they're dope 60/40 t-shirts, and the shorts are, like I said, truly the best in the business. Everybody I know, I refer over there. They are a American, USA loving, dope company. I love them. You're going to love them too. Everyone that listens to this podcast knows the importance of never skipping leg day. So the 7-inch shorts are chef's kiss, just a must. So I'll put that link in the show notes and I'll put it on social media. Please share it with friends and family, and it supports me, it supports the show, and hopefully it'll help spread the words to other men. It's not the exact shirt I have on now, but it's got Dear Brothers, our logo on the front, and on the back, it's Proverbs 27:17, which is kind of it's our motto around these parts. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens the other, which is, really the ultimate goal of this podcast. So that will be up. Easy as that. Buy you some sweet t-shirts and shorts. Quick, fast, and in a hurry. Speaking of not skipping leg day, let's talk a little bit about training today. This is an important question that I get asked all the time, which is, when I train, should I train to failure or not? And although this seems kind of like a simple question, it is a little bit more complex, and I want to explain some of the nuances of it to you guys today so that you can go forward into the gym and know the cost and benefits of going to failure or not, for that matter. First and foremost, we have to qualify what failure means. So in the context of this episode, when we're talking about muscular failure, we're really talking about the inability to do another rep because of muscular fatigue or even a lack of strength. Like, you did 8 reps, gun to your head, you couldn't do 9. So now we have to ask the question, is going to failure better than doing a few reps shy of failure? And the answer is, it depends, just like everything in life. Going to failure will absolutely improve the hypertrophy of your muscles, the growth of your muscles. They will get bigger. And I do prescribe 2 failure sets to my clients on a weekly basis, depending on where they are in their training and who they are. And there are some subjective measures we look at, but there are levels to how we do this. The first is that going to failure is going to result in quite a lot of fatigue. And although you may have maybe a few percentage points improvement in overall hypertrophy, the amount of fatigue you get from always going to failure will likely limit your ability to train as much. And that is going to hinder your ability to get bigger muscles, because you simply can't train as much as you can't train as much when you're always going to failure. Example being, say on Monday it's your lower body day and you crush 2 to 3 lower body movements. You squat, you lunge, you do an extra hack squat, whatever. And you do those to failure. You're not going to be able to train those muscles again on Wednesday, or even derivatives of those exercises, because the overall damage induced by that first workout is just too much. It's not realistic. So that's kind of part one. If you're just always going to failure, you just can't recover in time to do it again. The second part of this is that most people don't even have a good concept of their failure point. A lot of men go into the gym, they strap the weights on, they pick a few exercises, they do a few sets, and they leave without recording a damn thing. They have no clue if they did more or less or the same as their prior workout. And because of this, it's impossible to know what their failure point is, because maybe on your last set, you went to failure, but it was with some random weight for a random amount of repetitions, we're not actually learning anything about your actual point of failure with a certain movement for a prescribed set of repetitions because you didn't record any of it. So part two is that most people just aren't recording what they're doing. So it's impossible to know what their failure point is that is actually useful. It's just like a random, somebody sent me a message last week and they were like, hey, I did 4 sets of back squats and the last set I went to failure. And I'm like, oh, cool. Well, how many reps did you do for your first 4 sets? And they were like, I think I did like 8, and then I did like 10-ish, and then maybe like 11, and then I think my last set I did like 18. I'm like, so you have no idea? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, that's unhelpful. Lastly, and this is going to cover pretty much all of you listening today, and I really actually want you to walk away with this the most. The great majority of men do not actually get anywhere near enough strain during a lifting session. They underload themselves. Phenomenal example. I have a client that started with me recently, and one of my favorite movements with him is the dumbbell row. So his prescription is for 3 sets of 10, and then a 4th set, which is to muscular failure, AKA he can no longer get that dumbbell up and back towards his pocket. He used 45 pounds for his first 3 sets, but on the 4th set, he was able to do 25 reps on each arm. That tells me that 45 pounds is far too low for his 3 sets. You should not have 15 reps left in the tank on your 4th set if the load is appropriate for the first 3. Ideally, I should maybe see like 15 reps or 14 reps or 13 reps or maybe even 10 reps again. I use this example because far too many men are underloading themselves, and because of that, their muscular gains and their strength are minimal relative to what they should be. In fact, if the load is too low or staying the same all the time, the body has no reason to make an adaptation, and you're just going to stay the same. So, to reiterate, part 1, if you are always going to failure, you're probably going to fatigue far too much, and this is going to limit how much you can actually work out across a week. That really isn't ideal. Part 2, most men, including many of you listening, probably don't track your weights or reps, and this limits your ability to know where your failure point is. It's just a bunch of guessing. Part 3, and most importantly, most men are way underdosing the load they should be using to actually make progress. So now begs the question, which some of you might have right now, hopefully, is how much should you be loading? So here's the quick and skinny of it all. Listen to this, write this down, re-listen to it, whatever you got to do. This is the important stuff. Number 1, you should train and have roughly 1 to 4 repetitions left in the tank by the end of an exercise. AKA, if you are prescribed to do 4 sets of 10 dumbbell rows, you should feel like you could have done 11 to 14 repetitions, but you stopped at 10. Easy as that. And this applies to literally every exercise. What you'll often hear is RIR, which just means reps in reserve. So if I say I want you to have 2 to 3 reps in reserve and I prescribe 3 sets of 10, that means you could have done 12 or 13 reps because you had 2 or 3 in reserve, but you stopped at 10. Simple as that. Number 2, you should test your limits with a few 2 failure sets here or there to actually see if your working weights match up with your max weights and to give your body that little extra hypertrophy stimulus every so often. Get that little, Arnold Schwarzenegger, we're going to get the pump type situation going on. I typically, personally, program a 2 failure set in each workout for certain people of a specific movement. And it's typically only 1 set or the last set of a certain exercise. And I ensure that that movement's not going to be repeated in roughly the next 24 to 48 hours. Just enough so that they can recover effectively. But, an important caveat, this depends on the muscle. Your biceps, for instance, are going to recover much more quickly than your hamstrings are. So we may be able to train your biceps and your triceps far more frequently and at closer to failure loads than your hamstrings, because the damage that incurs is just so high that it's impossible to recover from in something like your hamstrings. So our question comes back. Should you train to failure? Per the science and my recommendation and what I do with my clients, yes, you should train to failure occasionally to test out if your loads are appropriate. Like my client earlier, if you're doing 3 sets of 10 and then your fourth set you do 25, your first 3 sets were not what they needed to be. That number needs to be much closer. However, when it comes to training to failure, you should not be doing this all the time for every exercise. And you should be picky about the exercises you do that you're going to failure with, right? There's obviously some semblance of safety concern that gets involved if you're back squatting and you're getting to 30 reps and the thing's about to fall off your back. I'm not saying that you're going to hurt yourself doing that stuff, but doing, max rep deadlifts for 30 reps is probably not the best usage of your time. But doing a couple of drop sets or a pyramid set with biceps, triceps, calves, even some certain push-up movements, yeah, that stuff's all great. I'm personally pretty stringent with my clients about what they go to failure doing and what they don't. It is a fine line, so don't be willy-nilly about the exercises that you're using and going to failure with. If you need help with that, drop me a message on the socials, leave a comment on here, email me, jackson@taylorsportsperformance.net. I'm happy to help. This can be a little bit complicated, but just remember, going to failure all the time isn't great, but most of you are also probably underloading. So have 1 to 4 reps left in the tank when you're doing your exercises and you're completing your sets and reps, but occasionally test yourself out, go to failure, feel the muscles burn, get swole, get jacked, get tan, the whole 9 yards. As always, God bless, be strong, go get swole, gents.